Hello, Shred Strongers. It's Jen, and I'm joined with Jess, which is a new little addition. Today we're going to be talking about how the heck to balance bike training with weight training because bike season is upon us for 100% of us. Because I actually don't have anyone in the program that's in the Southern Hemisphere yet, but bike season training does impact a lot, and I wanted to take some time to talk about that as well as ways that you can optimize your recovery as you're trying to still maintain your strength training and then get some more miles on the bike. And this is no matter really what type of biking you do, whether it's gravel cycling, regular mountain biking, cross country mountain biking, enduro, downhill, or so on and so forth. I will kind of break it out into, segments because I know a variety of us here in the group do a variety of those types of cycling, myself included. So I'm training for a long distance gravel race. Well, I don't want to call it a race. It's technically a race. So I'm not going to be racing. I'm going to be riding and having fun. But I am training for the SBT Gravel 100 in August. So that's obviously going to be having me put a little bit more mileage on my legs than I normally would if I'm just training for a mountain biking event. But I know some of you are also new to gravel cycling this year. Some of you have gotten a gravel bike, and I want to go ahead and just make it a little bit clear on how the heck you balance everything. That being said, I do also want to go ahead and completely disclose I don't have children. I don't have kids. I have a dog. I'm being realistic here because we don't all have the same 24 hours. If you've listened to my podcast, I'm a firm believer in that we don't all have the same 24 hours. So I respect that. So please know I do try to acknowledge that, hey, I'm not a parent, but please know that I'm trying to be as fluid and flexible with the ways that I describe these things and these methods, considering if you do have tiny humans in your household or even large humans that maybe act like tiny humans that maybe you're taking care of, because that can obviously change things. So please know I'm trying to respect that. And I will never claim that my doggo is equivalent to having a human child because that is definitely not the case, even though he might be needy. All right. But I'm going to recognize that in all fairness. So if I'm looking over off to the side here, it is because my little notes are off there. All right. But with bike season training, let's dive in. There is going to be more volume on your legs and, of course, your cardiorespiratory system. So will be a little bit more demands there. So my focus and what I usually recommend for people to focus on during bike season is just trying to get at least 2 strength training sessions in. Just make that your minimum, make that the lowest hanging fruit, make that the bare minimum. And even if that is difficult for you to do, if the 45 to just over an hour, 45 minutes to just over 60 minutes in the gym or at your home gym is still difficult for you, then what I recommend is popping open the workout, warming up as much as you can within about 5 to 10 minutes. Maybe do the first, couple of sets or supersets or what have you, but then try to get in through at least that main lift of the day, which is going to be the lift that is usually the squat, the deadlift, or some sort of pressing either overhead or from your chest and pulling, so some sort of rowing. So if you can at least get through that and the main lifts of the day, then great. You're able to maintain your strength during the summer, spring and summer, while you're cycling a lot, and while you're doing a little bit more cardiorespiratory work on the bike. So that would be the bare minimum that I would tell you. Maybe set the clock for 30 minutes, get through the workout as much as you can. And here's the biggest part with this. Don't feel guilty about missing the rest of the workout. That is so key because I feel like, as humans, we can be very guilt stricken. We can, should all over ourselves. I should be doing this. I should be finishing my workout. I should be making time for this. Friends, we have lives. We have lives outside of our training, and the training is not really meant to take up your entire life and take up hours on end each day. It's meant to supplement your life. It's meant to enhance your life. And I really want there to be that understanding that, if you don't get the last set, hey, I just to let you know, if it makes you feel any better, sometimes I don't even get around to the last set because I want to do other things. And I do train at a local gym. So I am trying to be a part of their programming as well, but without also tiring my 44-year-old ass out. So I'm trying to recognize that. And, sometimes that does mean that I skip the last superset because I'm wanting to do maybe, a WOD or a workout of the day with my friends. So please know there is a give and take. And it's hard for me, I will say, like, even though I just told you not to feel guilty about missing maybe the first or the last superset or two, sometimes I feel guilty because here I am, I created this workout, and I test everything that I, of course, developed for you all. But still, there are moments where I'm like, gosh, I'm not even doing like 100% of everything. But that's okay because that's life. And I would love to work out with my friends occasionally. So that's just my little soapbox that I wanted to go ahead and stand on for a little bit and say, it does take time to not feel guilty about skipping certain things and maybe missing certain elements of the workouts. And that's okay. That's kind of part of this process to see what bandwidth you have. But ultimately, just try to get in 2 of those strength workouts. Ideally, the first day and the second day every week is going to be ideal right now in the cycle. And then the third day, that's one reason why I make it optional, is because it is going to be a little bit more quad heavy. And because we are all cyclists in this group, we're biking more. Our quads might feel a little bit more spent, especially depending on if you're a menstruating individual during that time of the month. That can also impact certain things, depending, of course, on how your body responds to that. So please respect that. Please know that, with extra biking, and maybe depending on your cycle, and how your body responds to your cycle, that can that can change how your quads and just how your legs feel in general. Now, my rule of thumb, that being said, is if you do hop on your bike and maybe you did end up doing the squat workout, or your legs are starting to feel a little heavy from a previous ride or a previous workout, you hop on the bike, or maybe even before you hop on the bike, you're like, oh man, shit, my legs are feeling awful. I don't know how this bike ride's going to feel. It might feel awful. And you're going to start spiraling and start thinking like negative thoughts and just, this might not be an ideal bike ride. That's fine. Acknowledge how you feel. Of course, I'm not telling you to tamp down how you feel and ignore how you feel. Acknowledge how you feel because how you feel is very real. But please know, just try to start pedaling for the first few minutes. And if you give yourself a good 5, 10, maybe even 15 minutes, if you're a diesel engine like I am, you might notice that your legs will feel a little bit better. You're able to get some blood to that area of your body as you're pedaling, and that could probably start to help you feel a little bit better as you progress on your bike ride. So that's the other element, is just trying to recognize some soreness, which is natural. But then, really just trying to show up for your bike rides and try not to have that negative spiral in the mindset as you do it. Okay. I know it's hard. Again, this isn't easy. And I'm by all means, I'm not a behavioral coach, but being a health coach, of course, behavior is a huge, it's more than like 75% of my training. So it's all behavioral, honestly, as a health coach. And that is one of the things that we talk about often, is shooting all over ourselves, shooting all over ourselves, making sure I'm saying the right thing. And then just trying to avoid, a little bit of negative spiral, or trying to recognize how you're feeling in the negative spiral. Be curious about how you're feeling, and then just kind of show up anyways and be curious and see how you feel as you bike. Okay. Now, I did already talk about, if you're limited on time to do your first few supersets in the strength workouts, the other option is, especially if you're traveling or things like that, or maybe you just don't want to lift anything heavier and you just kind of want an easy day. Perfect example is maybe your menstrual cycle. If you are a menstruating individual, maybe it does hit you hard for like 1 or 2 days a month. I know that is me. Great. Recognize how you feel. Try not to push it if you're not really feeling it. Maybe you're not sleeping really well. Maybe the kids kept you up or the dog kept you up, whatever. Then I really recommend reaching for the body weight workouts. These body weight workouts are body weight in bands usually. So if you can travel and if you take a set of bands with you, that would be ideal. But the body weight workouts you can get anytime in the program. So there's body weight workouts. There's also core supplemental workouts as well. Now these are always available in the program tab. So look for that kettlebell icon on the bottom of the app, and then you can pop that open, kind of scroll through the workouts and see them. Now, the other thing too, and I might not have some core workouts in there right now because I'm doing a lot of core with the sequence, but you always will have the body weight workouts. Now, the other thing too, the other way you can get to it besides the kettlebell icon program tab is just tap the big blue plus sign in the lower right-hand corner in the app at any time. That will open it up to, you choosing, like for me, it asks me, do I want Jen's program or the Shred Strong program? This is a new thing, by the way, as of like a week ago. So I've never before seen Jen's program. Jen's program doesn't exist. I have no program. My program is just Shred Strong. So I picked the Shred Strong program. Then once you pop that open, you can actually choose an activity, like a cardio activity, or you can choose a workout. So then you're going to select workout. And when you select workout, that's what's going to pop up and show you, the days 1, 2, and 3 for strength, as well as the body weight workouts, as well as mobility and things like that. Now, the other things you're going to see in that program tab or the workout little plus button is race start intervals as well as a quick race day warm up, because 'tis racing season, and quite a few of you have already messaged me over the past few weeks, because some of you, especially who live in the Southwest, have already started racing. So I'm trying to have those in there for you anytime. So it will be basically in there from now. Those options, those race day workouts and the race day intervals will be in there from now until basically fall, when the season kind of changes in winter and snow starts to fly. So just a heads up, those are things that I recommend for the warm up. So the quick race day warm up, really recommend on race morning. I do recommend you trying it out the week or two before you're at your race, so that way you can actually know what the race day warm up is like. But it takes about maybe 10 to 20 minutes. Now, obviously, you can make that longer if you do have a shorter race, because the shorter your race, the longer your warm up should be, or the shorter your event, the longer your warm up should be. Just because you're going to go out hot out of that gate, generally speaking, whether it's enduro or cross country, it doesn't really matter. So you really want to be warm. That way you can kind of prevent injury. All right. So those are always going to be there for you. The race start intervals, just FYI, and I always message people when they tell me that they have a race coming up and explain this to them. But just as an FYI, the race day intervals are something that I really recommend doing about maybe 4 days before your race, just so you can kind of get the cobwebs off your legs. You can get really used to feeling what it is like to go kind of hard for a few seconds, but not too long, because there isn't that many intervals in there. So those are always there as a resource for you. And of course, mobility. So mobility routines are always in there. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And those are things that we're going to talk about next. So with the increase in volume on and off the bike, as well as trying to maintain your strength programming, your work life, your love life, if you have one, your family life, all of that stuff, it's really important. I mean, of course, it's always important, but it's especially important right now to really optimize your recovery as best as you possibly can. And please, all of these considerations are meant to be taken with a grain of salt based on what you're capable of doing. Again, if you're a parent, if you own your own business, if you do both those things, then great. You kind of need to think about these things according to how much bandwidth you have emotionally, physically, and mentally. Okay. So the first thing, mobility. All right. Mobility is our habit for this month. Just trying to get in at least a couple minutes of mobility, whether it's while watching Netflix before bed, maybe while you're waiting for dinner to cook, maybe while you're playing with your kids, you can be down on the ground with them, whatever it is, however you can get at least a couple minutes in with mobility, because you'd be amazed at how much better it can feel even after just 1 or 2 minutes. Now, mobility isn't necessarily a magical pill, and I'm never going to say that foam rolling is magical. Foam rolling can be quite painful sometimes, actually, but some studies have shown that foam rolling doesn't necessarily elongate your fascia or whatever they tried to say. It just honestly helps touch your muscles. It's kind of like massage, all right? And the same thing has been shown with massage. It's not the thing that's going to improve your performance necessarily or anything like that, but it can help relax your muscles a little bit, especially if you do tend to have restless leg syndrome, or maybe you just are buzzing after an evening bike ride. I know that's how I get. Like if I go ride at night, I'm usually buzzing as I'm going back to, going to bed, just because I'm so excited. I got to hang out with my friends, I got to bike, and then I spiked my heart rate, just a few hours before bed, which is a perfect storm for me to just sit there in bed, even after having some magnesium and things like that. Like I'm kind of a little wired. Like it's hard for me to come down, just because I'm fairly extroverted, if you didn't realize. So like, please know, if I take a few minutes and just, do a couch stretch, foam roll my quads, maybe even use, my other thing besides foam rolling. Oh, damn. I have it in my nightstand. I have it under my nightstand upstairs because it is my favorite thing. It is called the stick, and it's like this PVC beaded thing that has handles on the end, and you literally like just rub your leg or whatever body part, calves, even the low back, like whatever you can manipulate, and just kind of roll it over your body. I like that thing actually even more than foam rolling. It's kind of a little loud, when you're using it, but I like the stick before bed. I totally forgot it was upstairs under my nightstand right now because I literally just used it last night because I did a trainer ride yesterday since we've been getting rain here in Denver. Um, but yeah, some foam rolling can just help you kind of calm down. Couple that with some deep breathing, some belly breaths if you can. This is where the meditation instructor in me pops out. So I apologize if you're not maybe into that. But I also don't apologize because it can be really magical in terms of, just calming down your entire system right before bed. All right. Breathing through your nose, maybe elongate that exhale, things that I've kind of talked on and on about, or on and off about, and on about in the past with some other Zooms that we've done. See if you can get some mobility routines in. I have that there in the app. It's for you to use anytime. Can include foam rolling if you have one. Um, I do recommend at least the couch stretch. If you don't have the foam roller or you don't want to foam roll before bed, great. Try to hold at least a couch stretch for, at least 30 seconds per side, per leg. That's going to be ideal. And that is in the mobility routines. Check that out. And then even just a manual massage, just with your own hands of your quads and things like that could help feel really good. Um, Now, I do also recommend the other thing that I've had folks comment on is going to be, some tension, and I'm at a standing desk. Don't worry, I'm wearing pants. But is finding that little hip bone there, right? And kind of getting into that like TFL-ish area, all right? That can be a little bit of a cause of some tension for a lot of folks, especially after bike rides. And that could be a really good spot to maybe focus on foam rolling or focus on if you have a yoga ball or like lacrosse ball or a tennis ball. Lacrosse ball might be a little too hard, but a tennis ball could give a little bit more and give you some comfort there. Just even, massaging there or on the outside of your glute here. So your glute med area. All right. Those are going to be some common areas that I've noticed over the years, as well as some people kind of commenting on things with recent stuff. And just in terms of tension and things like that. Hey, Dylan, welcome. But yeah, that massaging that area could really help just relieve some tension, especially before bed and especially after some bike rides. Okay. So first things first is like, just focusing on mobility as best as you can. That's one way to optimize recovery. The next thing, just feel free to chime in here too if you want to. I mean, I don't want you to do your job because you've just been doing it all day, but protein, protein is one of these most underrated things. And I mean, even like a lot of my RD friends, like they kind of laugh about what I mean, I'm not a registered dietitian. I am a health coach, but we all kind of laugh about what we've learned in terms of like recommended daily allowance, and it's just really low. And unfortunately, it's recent studies in the last like 5 years have kind of shown that, especially if you're an active individual, it could be really optimal for you to have more protein than definitely than the RDA. So, rule of thumb, and this is going to sound like a lot, but there's going to be a caveat here. Try to just have a portion of protein at every meal. Just make that a simple goal. If you look at the number, which I'm going to tell you in a moment, and you're like, hell no, Jen, like there isn't enough money in the world for me to eat that much protein, and that's fine. That's fine. I'm a little itty bitty thing. Like I'm only 5'2", and I am definitely a protein holic. It makes me feel good. I'm just hungry often. For me, this is what works, and this is what my doctor and I have decided that it just works for me. But generally speaking, eat a portion of protein, at every meal if you can, at every main meal and every snack. What I recommend is, just kind of look at your hand. And this is a little bit on the smaller side, in my opinion. But if you just look at your hand, don't imagine the fingers or your thumb there. And you kind of have like the palm of your hand. All right. It's going to be about 3 to 4 ounces of cooked protein if you're non-vegetarian or vegan, right? So aim for that, and of course, if you're a vegan or vegetarian, great. Choose a protein option that works for you. Of course, depending on if you're gluten tolerant, things like that, obviously I'm not going to suggest Satan to anyone because then Satan becomes Satan. But it's one of those things like just be mindful of protein, just bring some mindfulness to it. Some folks will often ask, Jen, is there a ballpark number? I really dislike giving ballpark numbers only because I don't know your medical history. I don't know, if you're, what is your situation with your GI and digestion and kidney health, things like that. Like, when was the last time you had a physical? When was the last time you had some blood work? But if you wanted to know what recent research has said is, generally aim for about 0.7 to 0.6 on the lower end of your body weight. So you're looking at about 70 to 70%. So if you take your body weight in pounds, I'm not talking metrics for those of you in Europe who are going to watch this rerun. But if you take your body weight in pounds and you multiply it by about 0.7, 0.76 or so, then great. That's going to give you a good ballpark, for a minimum to aim for. And again, I don't like to ever prescribe anything, and I never do prescribe anything, but I do offer suggestions. And that is kind of a good place to start. And if that seems really high for you, then great. See if maybe you can keep track of how much protein you're getting now. Get an idea, build awareness. If you've ever watched any of my other Zooms or listened to my podcast, I'm real big on building awareness, because with awareness comes some really magical moments for yourself to really develop some better habits that maybe you're seeking for your goals. But build some awareness around what you're eating now. Maybe use MyFitnessPal or just a free app or something like that right now, just to get an idea. Build that awareness around how much protein you're eating now, and then maybe try to add a little bit more, like add another ounce or two at dinner, add another ounce or two at lunch. You don't want to add a ton of protein all at once. And those of you who've worked with me over the years know that I'm real big on that, because if you're going from, like, say you average 50 grams of protein a day to like 150 grams of protein per day, you're going to become like a fart factory basically, because your body's just not used to it's a lot. Digesting protein can be a lot. It can be hard on the system. So it's nice to kind of stair step. And I believe in small incremental changes over time really build some lasting changes and lasting habits. So protein, make sure you're optimizing protein as best as possible. Try not to skip lunch if you're skipping lunch because of work, being busy, and things like that. The next thing, the third thing, is sleep. I mean, hell, I probably put sleep above protein, but I did want to talk about protein because it is probably the number one thing I see folks, you know, underutilizing. But sleep, again, if you're a new parent, I am with you in spirit and I empathize with you. So just do the best that you can in terms of sleep. If 6 hours makes you feel good, great. Try to get at least 6 hours, but that's like a bare minimum. Ideally, 7 to 8 hours is a good start. But 4 to 5 hours is going to be tough. You're going to start to notice some, I don't want to say neurodegenerative because that makes it sound like an illness, but you're going to notice that maybe you're not functioning as well as possible. And it could be a safety factor, especially if you are doing some high risk cycling on some technical trails. I want you to have some wherewithal while you're doing this. But sleep is magical. It straight up is. It's one of these times when your body's able to really truly recover, especially after some mobility, maybe some deep breathing work for like a moment or two, whatever you can muster before bed. But just trying to aim for as best as you can, as best of sleep as you can. Now, here's the next thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to put my health coaching hat on for this. If you don't get 7 hours of sleep, please don't beat yourself up over it. What's done is done, and great. The best thing you can do is the next night, just try to wind down a little bit. Maybe think about what the hell kept you up all night, or what, did I wake up at 3 a.m. worried about work? Not saying from experience or anything, but if that's kind of a habitual thing, then great. Maybe it's something that maybe you should kind of write down or talk about for a moment before you go to bed, and get the worries out of your system, maybe onto some paper. And I know not everyone likes to journal or anything, and I get it. Like, my partner is definitely like anti-journaling and anti-deep breathing and like kind of the polar opposite of me. So I think that's why we work. But the moments that she has tried to like do some journaling and some deep breathing, which actually we just talked about before we hopped on, she's like, you know what? Like, I actually feel a lot better. Everyone's different. Again, explore what works for you. There is no one size fits all. But with sleep, try to find a bedtime routine that really works for you. I am tempted to do a community Zoom just on sleep and recovery, period, and just talk about sleep and ways that we can kind of utilize that and maximize that or optimize it rather, as best as we can. But I'm not all about hacks. I'm not all about anything like that because I really feel like routine stuff is really what's going to work for you. Okay, for me, I find personally, and maybe sharing this will help you all. And a lot of my clients I work with have found this as well. Trying to not scroll right before bed, and not be on your phone right before bed is helpful. And maybe not watching like action TV, or please don't watch unsolved mysteries right before bed or something like that. Like don't watch something that's really going to get you thinking or is really going to amp you up and kind of give you a little bit of an adrenaline dump right before bed. I love these shows and I love those things, but maybe watch something like Ted Lasso. If you're going to watch something before bed, watch something a little bit more wholesome. Or Working Moms. Oh my gosh, if haven't watched that yet, that is hilarious. But watch something that's maybe a little bit more lighthearted comedy, and then have a wind down that doesn't include scrolling your phone. Even if it's just like 10 minutes, don't scroll like for 10 minutes before you go to bed. Start there and then kind of build up and maybe see if you can get to like 30 minutes. And 60 minutes is usually the magic, you know, period of time according to some sleep research. But keep in mind, like, sleep research is actually still fairly new. It's kind of a concept that we really haven't started to delve into except since the 1950s. So it's kind of sad that we've only been researching for that long. But please know it's still in its infancy, just like nutrition science, things like that. Um, but I try to stay on top of it as much as possible. But to me, no matter what the research is out there, you are n equals one. So what works for you is what is important. Okay, so keep in mind that that's really very real thing. Fourth thing, eat enough. Please, goodness, eat enough. Um, Now's not a good time, especially if you caught my episode that just dropped today for Making Shift Happen. Now's not a time, even if you have an event or race coming up. If you're trying to have more output and you're trying to bike more and do all the things, now's not really a good time to maybe focus on fat loss and you know or weight loss, whatever you want to call it. But I tend to call it fat loss, um, because it's just going to put you in a little bit of a hole, and it can impact your recovery, your mood, everything like that. It can impact your focus, your ability to focus at work. So again, I don't want to give out numbers just because everyone's so different. My needs could very well be different than Jess's needs and Dylan's needs, based on height, weight, age, activity levels during the day, as well as other things, like NEAT or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, like how much if you can imagine, my NEAT is actually very high because I talk with my hands all the time and like I just move a lot. I don't necessarily fidget a lot, but I do move a lot. Um, I walk the dog a lot and, just a variety of things. So that is going to impact my caloric needs and energy needs compared to someone else who might be a little bit more desk bound. But give you a rule of thumb, try to aim for at least 3 meals a day, 3 balanced meals a day. And when I say balanced, I mean, protein. If you can, ideally have a vegetable in there, at least in one or two of those meals, at a minimum. And, obviously carbs are going to be really filling. They're going to help satiate you, keep you less hungry, along with the protein. Um, and then, of course, a fat as well. So that's what I mean by balance. It's just kind of make it a little bit more of a balanced meal. Don't just have like a meal of just maybe crackers, just to give you an example. Um, Plus, so 3 meals plus, a couple snacks per day. I'm not going to talk about intermittent fasting or anything like that with this because that's a whole other topic. And if that works for you, then great. Continue doing that. I'm not going to, argue that point, but just try to make sure that you're eating. I know a lot of us in this group are healthcare workers. Obviously, if you're a shift worker and you have patients, things like that, that's going to dictate, how quickly you can eat and what you can eat. mid shift is probably not a good time for you to have a big ass salad because they take forever to chew. And salads are like the worst possible thing for you to eat when you're in a little bit of a rush. And while I'm a proponent of eating slower and things like that, hey, you have to recognize sometimes with a lot of us, especially if you are a shift worker in the healthcare industry, you have to eat when you can eat, and if that means that you're eating a little bit faster, fine, so be it. It means that you're eating a little bit faster. I just had this conversation with one of you actually earlier today. The point is, eat. Like, it's better to have a meal, as even if it is a quick meal, to have some sort of meal, because then you're able to show up for yourself, as well as your patients or whatever your line of work is for the rest of the day. Okay. And of course, it's just healthy. It's just healthy. It's a healthy habit to get into. But yeah, snacks. Ideally, if it's right around a workout, again, I don't want to give out numbers or anything like that because it's very prescriptive, but just try to make sure that you have a little bit of protein, all right, maybe 10 grams or so if you're looking at labels, if your food has a label, but, a little bit of protein with some carbs, ideally. If you are a little bit more fat specific, then that's obviously going to be different for you if you do prefer fats and that makes you fats make you happy. I want to respect that. Great. Have a fat with protein or whatever works for you. But just have a little bit of a snack, something to kind of give you a little bit of fuel, maybe about 30 to 60 minutes before your activity level. Right. And again, this is just a rule of thumb. Now, fifth point here is snacks on bikes. This is my final point. Snacks are my favorite, especially snacks on bikes. All right. I'm not here to obviously like condone certain brands. I'm going to have folks, maybe chime in what they like. I personally love to have like real, I don't want to call it real food because, all food's kind of real food, I guess, or it exists. It's not a figment of my imagination. But, when I say real food, I mean like stuff that I'm making, basically pancakes. So for me, it's my Kodiak cake pancakes because that's my food that I make, and it packs really well for me and it works for me. Some people that I've worked with over the years, it's boiled potatoes with salt and maybe like a little bit of like what do they do? They've done like prosciutto in there, some Parmesan, like things like that, which sometimes makes me a little nervous just to carry that in my snack bag. But again, it works for them. It's a nice carb thing. But what I recommend is, again, this is going to be different based on a variety of factors, especially your muscle mass and activity level and intensity of your rides. But ultimately, you want to get into a habit at least of having a snack. If your bike ride is an hour or more, have a snack. All right, just have a little sneaky snack while you're riding. Now, of course, everyone's different. Please know digestion is very much like a muscle. You kind of have to exercise it while you're training. And this is why the training rides right now, before any events or races that you might have later in the season, are so important for kind of determining what settles okay on your stomach. Because some people, hey, they can't digest certain, dextrins or sugars or things like that, right? So we have to kind of use this time now to explore what snacks work for us. Now, rule of thumb is every 30 to 60 or every 60 minutes or so, about 30 to 60 grams of carbs, roughly. And again, this is a ballpark figure, just to give you a baseline. I would say aim on the lower end of that first and just see like, hey, did my body agree with those honey stinger energy chews or did they not? Or do I like the stroop waffles or do I like those Kodiak cake pancakes that Jen keeps raving about? Like, figure it out. And please know there's no right or wrong answer, but your body will tell you like, oh, that was a wrong answer. Like that was the wrong snack maybe for me. Um, but just trying to get into the habit of having a little bit of a snack and having your little bag, your snack bags open. Don't litter, please don't litter. But having your snack bags open and maybe having a few chews, every 30 minutes and chewing them as much as you can while you're riding, or maybe you stop for a snack break and then just seeing like, okay, how did I feel on that ride? 30 minutes, 60 minutes later, or after that ride. Did I feel pretty good? Did I bonk? Did my energy feel a little bit low? Did my blood sugar maybe, kind of spike a little bit and then get a little bit lower because I'm only having straight sugar, So some people can't do energy chews. I know for me, for the longest time, I couldn't, especially right after college. I was hypoglycemic. So I actually need to be mindful of my protein intake. So this is why I learned years ago with the help of my doctor, the importance, and my registered dietitian, the importance of, balancing protein with my carbs. And I mean, little 20-year-old me, just thought I needed to, suck it up. But no, I just needed to feel. Oh, Dylan, thanks for that feedback. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll talk about some recommendations for that. But again, this is just ballpark. I have some individuals who are really training at high intensity. Keep in mind, some of these athletes that I work with can pull over 200 watts on average an hour, and they're doing this for multiple hours. They're going to need a little bit more on the higher end of carbohydrates. They're also leaner, they're more muscular, things like that. So that does come into, yeah, no naked carbs for you. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it, Jess. Um, but it comes in consideration because some of these athletes that I work with need upwards of about 150 grams of carbs per hour to kind of maintain that. And everyone's different. So I don't want to give, again, a rule of thumb. I love experimenting. Again, n equals one. You're kind of your own experimentation here. So kind of explore it and take some time. Maybe even keep like a little, a little food journal and just say like, hey, uh, you can even do this in Strava. You can add notes like ate such and such on this. And you can kind of start to go back and correlate things, and connect the dots a little bit. See if there's connection. Dylan, to answer your question, what kind of snacks do you recommend to hit that 30 to 60 grams? Again, it's kind of different. I'm a lazy cook. Just close your eyes or close your ears. I'm totally a lazy cook. Um, so during the week, Monday through Friday, I just have limited time to prep certain things. During the weekend, I have more time, if I'm not camping anyways. I tend to like Enduro Bites. I really like Enduro Bites bars. He has of course, I know Brian too. But we actually met because we had mutual friends in the nutrition industry, and we have like a similar philosophy in terms of like, hey, fiber's your friend. I mean, not necessarily when you're working out, but health philosophies like fiber's your friend. We need to talk about fiber more. We need to talk about vegetables more and like protein and things like that. Because Brian's a nerd. He has PhD in nutrition, and so we kind of talk about things. Um, I like their products. They tend to be okay on my stomach personally. But I will say I get flavor fatigue like nobody's business. And flavor fatigue is like if you're only eating sweets, if you're only eating whatever, I don't even know what maybe savory, which actually I wouldn't be mad about that, only eating savory. But like for me, I can't only eat sweets on my bike rides. I need to mix it up. So that's why I love Enduro Bites because it's a little chewy and there's little squares. Um, they they respond well to my stomach and I don't get upset with them. And the ingredients list is like really nice, wholesome foods, figs, dark chocolate, and like maybe two or three other ingredients. And I've literally watched Brian make these bars, which is kind of cool. Actually, all these bars are handmade, which I have much respect for Enduro Bites, because I know that's not the case for probably a majority of sports nutrition that's out there. So because I'm lazy, I depend on Brian's Brian's skill in the kitchen with Enduro Bites. So I like Enduro Bites. I also really like Honey Stinger. I love the Honey Stinger energy chews. But let me tell you, if I do energy chews, much to Jess's point, like just naked carbs, like if it's just like only sugary carbs or if it's really sweet, I have to then make sure that my next food, especially if it's like a couple hours or a 4 hour long bike ride, I have to make sure that maybe I'm having a fig bar next or something like that. And keep in mind, fig bars, can't have like a ton of it because it does have a lot of fiber. Um, but this is when I'm also having like my little Kodiak cake pancakes with some chocolate chips or something like that. So I need to mix up things. Things that have also worked for other people are, you know, honestly, like baked goods. Like baked goods, and yes, I am totally saying croissants and like little lemon breads or like whatever you're able to tolerate. Of course, keeping in mind if you have any gluten sensitivities, of course, like, oh my goodness, don't eat anything with gluten. But, you know, baked goods actually hold up really well. They have really good moisture content. Actually, one of my friends who's an RD, we talk about this quite often on how much we love baked goods. Like I love pain au chocolat. Like I can eat that. because it's buttery, so it's got the fat, but then it has the sweetness of the chocolate. And I just love, I mean, I can always eat a pan of chocolate, but she loves croissants, and she also makes these like breads at home. Those are really nice. They keep really well. And what's great is they have more moisture than a lot of the sports nutrition bars that you can find on the shelf, because sometimes we have to keep moisture in check because moisture is kind of the breeding ground of bacteria and things that can make the food go rancid. So that's why sometimes you might notice like sports nutrition bars could be a little bit more on the dry side. But that's a whole other topic for a different day. But honey stingers, stroop waffles, I'm a real big, oh man, what I just discovered in the past year, it's a local Boulder company, and I know that all of you live in Colorado. Waffle, Vafels. I think there's an S on the end. He makes actual like little Belgian waffles with like a Belgian pearl sugar that's in there. But the ingredient list is also really good. I like it. It goes down easy for me. I tolerate it really well, but it's nice because it's like a 200 to 300 calorie, intake, and I'm good. But the rule of thumb, just so you know, snacks on bike rides, 30 to 60 grams per hour. That's going to be a good like starting point. But basically, if you do have a wearable device, like I wear a Garmin. If you have an Apple Watch and you do track your workouts and your bike rides, try to look at what you burn on average in that hour. You do not need to replace all of those calories. So, say you burn like 600 to 800 calories, please don't try to think like, oh, hey, I need to then prevent bonking, I need to then eat 600 calories every hour. No, that's not what I'm saying. Uh, Rule of thumb is usually aim for like 40 to 50%, like start there, especially if you're from a habit of never eating on the bike. Great, let's start small, like 40 to 50%. Like, let's just see, like, how's the 40% feel? Or if that's even too much, great, start with 30%. Again, like start where you're at, start with what you can tolerate and go from there. Okay. But rule of thumb is generally like right around the 50% mark. So if you burn on average 600 calories in an hour, if you're aiming for 300 calories to replenish every hour, you're going to be pretty good. Now, keep in mind, of course, this is going to vary for those of you who are doing longer distances and more intense distances, more intense routes, going uphill, going up, Flagstaff Mountain, something that's a little bit more intense, then that's going to change your needs, and that might increase your needs. If weather is kind of crappy or colder or also hot, so extreme weather, that's going to also change your needs as well. So things like that, just kind of, keep it kind of keep your energy topped off. The longer your ride also, this is where it becomes really key. Not even the day of your ride or day of your event, but even like the couple of days before your ride or event, just try to eat. Just try to eat the 3 meals a day at least. Just try to fuel yourself, please. That's the summary of today, is basically just try to love yourself a little bit more than maybe you might be right now. But then also pay attention and get curious around what might be working and what might not be working. But the day or two before a bigger ride, make sure you're staying hydrated. Make sure you're still trying to get as best of sleep as you can, and then still try not to skip any meals, okay? Because I know some folks, they have a tendency to skip lunch, especially. And that's all I'm trying to encourage. It's just like, hey, let's at least get in some good minimum meals. Now, please keep in mind, even though I'm saying 3 main meals, for some of you, that might be 2 main meals, because that's just what works for you and your schedule and your kids and things like that. And that's awesome. If that's what works for you and that's kind of where your minimum is like 2 large meals with some snacks in there, great, do that. But just make sure you're getting fuel throughout the day. That's all. All right. Let's try not to bonk while you're working or while you're riding. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea, Dylan. Dylan, Jess, feel free to unmute. I'm going to kind of open it up to like any other questions you might have. You can also message me in the chat. And then I do have a question for you two, and then I'm gonna ask folks this question in the group later. So, any questions, anyone? anything you want to add, especially Jess, because you're an RD and it's so great to have an RD that's present, but I also don't want you to work. So
No, you're fine. I mean, I totally agree with everything you said.
yeah.
Um, I think it's hard, especially for women to like get over the idea that it's okay to fuel on the bike. It took me a long time to be like, oh, it's okay that I'm eating here. I'm not here to create a calorie deficit. And when I finally made that switch, I was like, oh man. And it's funny because like I come from a history of ultra marathoning and like we'd eat out there, but you're out there for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours. And so obviously you're eating. But to be on a 2 hour bike ride and for me to think like, oh yeah, I should be fueling was
Yeah.
very foreign. So yeah, but
I
it
hear
game
here.
changed. Like
No,
snack
totally.
queen.
I
Yeah.
know now, and I had the same thing just because I was like, oh, I wasn't, I did half marathons. I wasn't like an ultra like you. But I did like century rides on the road bike. So I was actually a roadie. But I went from like, okay, yeah, I definitely need to fuel. But even when I was on the road bike, I wasn't fueling regularly. Like, God, if I could go back to my 20-year-old self and just be like, Jen, because I didn't
Right.
realize like, and that's why, I got this blood test and I'm like, oh, I'm hypoglycemic. Like, great. Like,
Mhm.
like I'm wondering why I'm like about ready to pass out.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and you
We have
start
this
to really
idea that like if
notice.
we're burning calories, we're going to come out ahead, but it's like
Yeah,
you're just trashing your metabolism. You're just
totally
trashing your ride. And yeah,
true. In your mood and
your
your
mood, you'll
like
probably go like home
sleep.
and eat a bunch of crap.
Yeah, exactly. Because at that point, you're just like blackout snacks, like you're just like
Especially if you
whatever I
wrap
can
your
get
ride at
in.
like sunset.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And you feel
Oh.
like trash.
Dylan, did you want to ask any other questions? Okay, we never get motivated on the trainer bikes, always makes time to roll outdoors. Is there anything to practice on our fun rides to promote fitness? Um, so hold on a minute, Dylan. I want to make sure that I understand your question. So you always ride outdoors. So you're wondering about your rides indoors. Like, is there anything to practice on your fun rides or fun rides outside to promote fitness? You can unmute if you want to. Like, should I be doing Belcher intervals, you sick little bastard? For those who are watching who maybe are not in the Denver area, Belcher, we have words for Belcher, right? Many of us in the area here have words for Belcher. It's just I don't want to say awful climb, but it is an interesting climb. Some people have thrown up on the climb going up. Some people take multiple rest breaks. Yeah, Belcher has a certain, je ne sais quoi about it. It's very challenging. It's a hell of a climb. But should you be doing Belcher intervals? Depends on your goal. Like here's the thing. Like Dylan, do you have any events or races that are coming up that do have like some extreme, or maybe even you don't even have to have a race or an event. I want to get away from saying that. Like you could have maybe a goal to do a certain ride this summer. Does it include like some massive climbs? Then yeah, maybe doing like trying to do a Belcher interval once or twice. Like once up, maybe twice up if you're really feeling it and you're keeping up with snacks. Great, that might actually help you with your goals. But again, it depends on your goals. But in terms of your fun rides to promote fitness, I personally, all right, so if you're asking to promote fitness, then I would um oh that I like that goal, Dylan. So Dylan, for those of you who can't see the chat, his goal is surviving my toddler with energy for big alpine descents. Hell yeah, I love it. Um, so yeah, if you're all about endurance and you're wanting to make your fun rides like promote fitness, I would say like, you know, maybe make it a little bit more fun and maybe make like certain segments like a little bit of a competition. Like, hey, I am going to try to see what I could do with this Belcher, today. Like, what can I do? How quickly can I get to the halfway point? How quickly can I get to the top? And don't necessarily make it a race, but make it more like just fun. And it's just you against you. That is the only caveat is it's you against your previous, interval or time attempt up Belcher. It's not you against, your buddy that you're riding with or a friend that's maybe on Strava or anything like that. Because I think a lot of times mountain bikers, we can get a little bit of comparisonitis. I know even for me, I can do that as well, like as a coach, because sometimes I feel like I'm a coach, I should be better at this. And I'm sure that a lot of you also feel that, like I've been riding for a few years. I should be better at XYZ, and that's when we need to be a little bit more gentle with ourselves. But maybe see how quickly you can do it. It doesn't have to be Belcher intervals. It could be, like uh, something that'll help you with your endurance, especially if you do want to climb really well. I do, as hellacious as it can be, if you want to get better at climbing, obviously besides strength workouts a couple times a week, doing some sort of climbing intervals are really going to help, and you don't have to do like 20 intervals, but just do like a nice little warm up for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then start to have a couple of your first climbs up, maybe climb up for again, like 4 to 5 minutes, and then have fun on the downhill. That'll be your recovery. And then do that, 5 to 10 times. Whatever you can do. I really find, like, because you are local, Green Mountain has even some gravel roads, like Green Mountain, North Table. There's going to be some gravel roads and routes out in Boulder area, Jess. If you're interested in this, then yeah, just see if you can just kind of do a little bit of a segment, and that'll take you 30 minutes or less, which is really cool. That's one thing I love about intervals, is that stuff usually takes a lot less than your actual ride. And it's kind of nice because you can do it before or after your ride. Generally, I prefer to do intervals before a ride, because then after a ride, I'm just kind of so spent that I'm not able to really give my intervals everything. So that's something you can do, and just consider your intervals a little bit more of your warm up, and you can have a blast and have fun, with the rest of your ride. But that can hopefully help you at least promote fitness. The other end of the spectrum is, I would say, like on your fun rides every week, practicing skill work, just focusing on one particular skill work during that uh, ride, like corners. I want to practice my switchbacks, or I want to practice my looking ahead. If you have a tendency to look at the damn front wheel, like I know a lot of us do, then maybe make that your fun goal for the day. It's like, I'm gonna look up. I'm gonna try to look through the turn, look where I'm going instead of down at my front wing. Things like that, I'm really big on, is just focusing on a certain skill during the ride, and that can make it a lot of fun. And sometimes, especially if you're with a group of friends, sometimes we can all each have our own skill to work on, or sometimes we're all working on the same skill. And I'd say most commonly, people are usually wanting to work on cornering and switchbacks and things like that. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea. Um, and same thing with, any of the trainer workouts that I have in the program, feel free to take them out on the gravel, on a gravel road, something that doesn't have a lot of traffic. Yeah, you don't necessarily have to do it on the trainer. And again, those are optional. It's just kind of nice to have a little bit more of a focused energy on something on the bike. And oh my God, sorry, the sun is out, and I feel like I haven't seen the sun in forever. So I'm like gonna absorb the sun after we're off of here.
We have zero sun still.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, Jess. I shouldn't have said that.
Just saying. Maybe tomorrow
Oh,
Boulder will see sun.
gosh, it is just like hard. When this happens, when this weather happens, this is when
I
I'm
know.
like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we didn't move to Portland, because Portland was like on our
Yeah.
top, like
Same.
top three. Yeah, you too. Oh my
Yep.
God, I love Portland. That's where we got engaged. Like, I love Portland. I used to work there a lot when I was in research, and but yeah, I don't know if I could handle this now that I've lived here. But I'm soft. Any other questions, Dylan, Jess? No one else had any other questions, so
No questions.
sweet. Thanks for joining. I'm gonna stop the recording here in a second, and I'll send this out to everyone.